As you undoubtedly know, anti-Semitism has hit an unprecedented level in the United States, and Jewish students on campuses have been at the forefront of the battle. And while this is not the focus of our biennial, we felt that it was important to hear from those who work with our students on campuses about what they're doing to battle anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism on campuses. So I would like to introduce a panel. First from OU JLIC, Tal Attia, the Chief Operating Officer. You can take your seats when I call on you. Judah Altman, the Mazkirol Klaliol, the Director of Habonim, Dror, North America. Sarali Cohen, Engagement Associate at Tanger, Hillel at Brooklyn College. Valerie Chazen, on the Board of Directors Chair for Students Supporting Israel SSI. So you guys can all take a seat, and we are very happy to have Scott Lasensky of Enter, who teaches at the University of Maryland Israel program, who will moderate the discussion. Scott, do you want to sit in the middle?
Sure. I'll sit on the end.
Do you want to sit on the end? Okay, so Sarali is running late, but we can start our discussion.
Should we grab the mic? Grab the mic. Testing. Hello. Boker Tov. Everybody loves swag. Who's at their stress ball? I brought the University of Maryland. Got to be loud and proud. Raise your hand. There's got to be someone in the room with the University of Maryland connection. Come on. Maryland. It's the Hillel. It's the Hillel shirt. We'll put it right here. Rabbi Ari Israel will quell because I brought the shirt. Judah, Tal, and Valeria, and Sarali is here. She's going to come in. Herbert, Allegra, just put her right here in this chair, and she's going to flow into the conversation. Again, my name is Scott Lasensky. All is not lost. All is not rotten on campuses. I will be on a campus on Wednesday. I teach a course on the U.S. and Israel. We're going to talk only about responses, emergency responses. We're not going to diagnose the problem. The problems are, as Shoshana reminded us, are replicating in real time. And if anyone knows me, I'm the one who's been saying for years, it's not as bad as you think. There are problems everywhere, in every nook and cranny. We're going to talk only about responses, what works. And if you want, Herbert hopefully will give me license, maybe what you're trying, because we have to be innovative too. So we may not even know what works. I'm going to start just by tempting you with something, and it's the realm that Hannah mentioned. That's why I'm on a campus. I teach at the Gildenhorn Institute for Israel Studies. The Gildenhorn family, the Nazarians in Los Angeles, the Schustermans in every part of America, and I'm going to offend someone else, but there are dozens of family foundations in Jewish communities in the last, let's say, 12 to 15 years, who've been funding Israel studies. For any of you who don't know, if you haven't been on a campus for a long time, if you want students to learn, to explore, to do what they're supposed to be doing in the university, you couldn't learn a lot about Israel in the classroom, on the campus. The number of courses on Israel, everything about Israel. I teach about politics, but the number of courses on Israeli culture, on arts, on science, have grown exponentially. So we should not to diminish the problem that we're facing today, but it's really important. These were investments in the last 15 years, after the wave of Holocaust studies, after the wave of Jewish studies. The investments in Israel studies are paying off. These are safe places on campus. I have a little trepidation. I have diversity in the class. I don't teach at Hillel. I teach in the university. Students are Jewish, students are Muslim, students are from all walks of life. I get evangelicals. They're more Zionist than some of the Jewish students, but it's very important. And this is something those who invest in Israel studies didn't know we'd be at this moment, but we're at this moment, and it's providing a safety net on many campuses. So that's a solution that and I'll invoke Rabbi Ben Berger from Hillel International, who's not here in this room, but he's been on his soapbox recently and talking about the importance of feeding the explorer in students, not only feeding sort of the defender, as he calls it. Help them explore, give them the tools. I'm teaching, I'm in the classroom. The biggest problems are not in the classroom. Judah, Tal, Valeria, who wants to start? What's working? What's working in your campuses? You want to start, Tal?
Sure, I'll give it a go. Hi, everyone. Good morning. A little bit of context about me. I came back from maternity leave on October 16th. And I called boss that morning and I said, so how are we responding to what's going on campus? And he said, we're doing what we always do, which was very powerful and gave me a framing for really what our response right now is. OUJLIC works with Jewish students on campus through programming, learning, Shabbat, hospitality, relationship building, community building. And those are the things we're continuing to do because identity affirming action is what the students need the most in our experience. They really need to feel like they can be proud Jews. They can continue to do what they've always done. They don't need to respond to the explosion on campus with self-erasure. They don't have to hide. They should continue to do what they always do proudly, safely, but proudly. So that's been very important to us to continue as we usually do with a lot of our learning and hospitality and events.
Herbert said we can go fast and rapid, and I'll be able to chutzpah. How many campuses? I know at Maryland we have someone from JLC. How many campuses in the U.S. does the OU have?
Well, so we have rabbinic couples on 27 U.S. campuses, and then we also have student leaders on over 60.
Amazing. I see it on the campus at UMD. There's sort of a bright, shiny object. I hadn't thought of it in the way you said. Identity affirming, positive. From this stage last night, for those who were here, we spoke about, I quoted Deborah Lipstadt, the oi and the joy. We can't lose sight of the joy, and we have to feed it. Judah, what's working in your realm?
Thanks for having me. I do want to focus on, I think when this panel is being introduced, a word that was used was battle. And I think that's a really interesting way of framing the conversation. The thing that works is education, time and time again, but not education from a place of grinding one's heels in, but a place of reaching out to the other. There was a poll recently that came out in Quinnipiac, the New York Times posted, where 18 to 34-year-olds, 52% of them were disappointed with Israel's response. And it speaks not because, we might have our opinions here, but it speaks because young people are frustrated. And frustration only breeds more frustration. And when I used to go to Columbia, and I just recently graduated, and at Columbia right now, protests are erupting on either side of the campus green, where basically people are yelling at each other across the divide. And when people use narratives in that context, they don't often understand what they're saying when they say words. And what we do is we say, okay, this is how you feel, that's really real. And let's unpack what you're saying. What is it that you actually mean when you say that? And what is it that you don't mean? And what is it that is anti-Semitic? And what is it that is anti-Zionist? And often when you speak to people, when you speak to young Jews and young non-Jews that are involved in these protests, they don't actually mean what they say often because they haven't thought about it, they haven't been educated. And there are classes, it's really good to, be identity affirming, but identity affirming that welcomes people in and doesn't push people away. Because when people are pushed away, they dig their heels in, and then it's more likely that they're more likely to say something anti-Semitic or more likely to tend towards anti-Zionism. What we need to say is come together and say, what is the education that we can share? What do these words mean that we're using? Why is this a situation? Define your terms. Why is Israel responding the way it is? What are the Israeli perspectives on the ground? Not campuses, not the people that are on the protests. And saying I was just going to ask you, Judy, give us a little more texture. Is it you were talking about using sources who are validators from Israel? Are you guiding students to news? Absolutely. Are you doing facilitate? Give us a little, take us into the room, into the square on campus. Of course. So we have many olim from our movement that have personal stories that right away moved to the hotels where there are displaced families and said, we're going to focus on education right now. We need to take care of the children that have been displaced. Those are personal stories. And so when we bring education to college campuses, we say, these are personal people that you know often and that are doing real work in Israel. And this is what they feel and how they feel. This is why they viscerally feel this way. And when you say this thing, it really hurts them. And how can we build a narrative together that they understand that? And also, they're allowed to feel, not the way they feel, but completely, but a way that bridges that gap. I just was in the car before I got here. A friend from far away visited, and we've often disagreed around Israel. And we sat in the car together, and I expected not to bring up Israel. And instead, she brought the conversation directly to Israel. And she talked to me about how her cousin was killed at the festival, and how her aunt was one of the top psychologists who's been involved in trauma care. And she still believes that there should be a ceasefire, and she still holds the opinion that she does, but she also really recognizes why Israel's responded and comes from a place of empathy, not a place of division. You wouldn't see her, spouting anti-Semitic narratives, being involved in protests. She would instead say, let's bridge this gap because I understand why people feel this way, and we need to move forward.
Judah, thanks. Judah and Tal told us about what's working in their realms, about education, about identity affirming. If I could push on Sarali, who just joined us, and Valeria, and maybe pivot a little toward, if you don't mind me, pushing you in the direction of action. Young people, I get to spend a lot of time with. I have 3 in my own house, and I'm in the classroom. They're like a lot of us in this room. Most of them don't have a job though, and so they can't immerse themselves in work, and they need something to do. So I want to ask Valeria and Sarali, I hope you can be flexible with me here. What can we ask people to do? On the campus, I'm teaching, so I'm asking them to learn. Enter, you heard from me in my organizational hat yesterday, Enter, we work with high school students. We give them something to do. We give them a partner in Israel to have dialogue, not just to worry and to talk. There are going to be volunteer opportunities opening up, Volunteers for Israel, and a myriad other organizations, including WZO. Herbert maybe can correct me from the back of the room. There's going to be things to do. There are Israelis trickling into communities. There are Israeli students on campus who need care, who need a kind of therapy and nurturing, and campuses don't have a lot of Hebrew speaking, and even if it's not Hebrew speaking, they don't have the sensitivity. What can you gear and point students and your colleagues to do right now beyond just, how to get them to consume the right information and have the right perspective? What can they do? I think people are hungry to do things, to take action. Sarali first, and then Valeria.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'd like to apologize for New York City traffic. In terms of actions, I think that what I find most with my college students is, one, it's very nice. I think something the Jewish community we've done over the years is we have this idea of, I stand with Israel. It's a beautiful idea, amazing. We stand with Israel, and it's not an action. I think something that recently has changed now, for example, is free the hostages. That's an actionable cause that students can get behind. That is something they can do to go to a rally, to speak on their behalf, to spread their information, to make sure that people know about them. So I'd say things like that, first of all. Everything that you guys talked about earlier about education is extremely important. I think another aspect that we're missing is bringing in our humanity to the dialogue. When students go in to have conversations with their peers on college campuses, yes, you need to know your facts so that you know what you're saying, but you also need to bring the human aspect. This is how it's affecting me. This is what happened to my cousin. I was there on birthright. I was there in how, whatever way. So understanding that connection. And 2, I think making sure that we reach out to allies.
Can I ask you quick, on understanding the connection on birthright, Hillel, you work at a Hillel.
Yes.
Hillel's one of the largest birthright trip providers. All those relationships, the young people on your birthright group, the Israeli soldiers who join, we're hearing anecdotes, but I want to ask you, are you asking people to reactivate those relationships? Are you
Yes.
promoting kind of interaction as first aid?
Yes.
Give us a little flavor of how it looks.
So we're very lucky on my campus. We have an Israel fellow on our team, which is a shaliach that comes in from Israel and works with us. She's from the south of Israel. She worked as a teacher in Sderot for the last 2 years, and so her connection to the south of Israel is extremely special and especially hard nowadays. I'm sure you can understand. So we had specific calls with high school students living in the south of Israel, and we created all these different Zoom calls for students to sit and meet with them, speak to them, understand what it is that they're going through, and hearing it from firsthand accounts. So I think that was something really special. We are also trying to have more sort of volunteer programs. We're going to have a Crochet for a Cause this week, where students are going to come in. We're going to make dolls to be sent to children in Israel. Students, I've urged all of my students to reach out to their friends, to people that they've met through trips. We've reactivated group chats that often die after trips. So I think
no, it's very important. We have to all remind ourselves of the 700,000 plus or minus birthright participants. About 180,000 are Israelis. And the relationships, we don't want to sit on the silent. We don't want to be the, now's the time to lift up those interactions. Valeria, can I ask you, Students Supporting Israel, SSI, tell us about that work, and if I can push you, as I said before, what actions can you get students to take? How can you point them in a direction of action?
Thank you. So absolutely. So Students Supporting Israel, let me share with you. We started 12 years ago when it was just the beginning of the BDS movement, and we realized there is a problem on our college campuses. We started SSI with a mission to be a clear and confident pro-Israel voice on college campuses and to support students in grassroots activism. So we started at the University of Minnesota, where I was a student coming right out of my IDF service to be a college student. And we grew slowly. Now it's 12 years later. We have presence on over 200 college campuses across North America, from here, Columbia University, thank you to UCLA, to Florida, everywhere around the country. Now, I want to share with, I was asked specifically before this panel to share what works, right, and action items, and I want to share with you what SSI has been doing, and I have 5 points for you, okay, to share. So the first one is mobilization. This is extremely important. We've been building a network of grassroots activists for the past decade. Everyone is mobilized 24 hours after October 7th. We already had the first rally on a campus. By now, a month later, we've mobilized about 25,000 students around the country to come out for rallies, for vigils, for poster hangings on campuses. We've mobilized not just the students, but also the parents, the community surrounding the campuses. We're telling them to email the administration to make sure administration are pushed to condemn Hamas and not just, make this weak statements, I would say, that are not saying much. So we've been basically with nonstop presence on the ground. Everybody is mobilized. Every single student, the parents of our movement, all the supporters of our movement. Everybody are mobilized to take action right now in any possible way. Okay, mobilization is very important. Now, the second item is exposure, and I want to talk about this. We want to expose the hate that is being taught on campuses, the supporters of terrorism on campuses. We want to expose the atrocities that are happening in Israel by Hamas. 10 years ago, we were already putting up an event around campuses that was called Make Hummus Not Hamas, and we're talking about Hamas terror group. 5 years ago, we have this campaign that's called the Van campaign, where we take a van of activists and it drives around different campuses. We had different routes, even on Ivy League schools and all around the country. 5 years ago, on the Van campaign, we did something that's called the Hamas Bake Sale, where we said, come here, donate, take a cookie for Hamas, and then students, without thinking, came and were given us $1 or $2, supporting Hamas, and then we were giving them a certificate to say, did you know what you just supported? You just supported a terror group. Okay, this was 5 years ago. Now, we're coming with messages on campuses that talk about the pay to slay, talk about Taylor's Force Act. We need to expose what is happening. And, if some organizations are feeling that, they're saying not in my name on campuses, well, we're saying it is in the name of the victims of terrorism, because we have posters on campuses that say, freedom fighters are not killing babies in their sleep. This is very important to expose the hate and to speak in the name of the people who are the victims, the people who are, have families, hostages.
We're keeping track. Mobilization, number one. Exposure, number two.
Yes, I
number
talked
three.
about it for a long time.
Number three.
And I'll just quickly say 3 more points. So of course, education has been said. People need to know what they're talking about. So education is an ongoing effort by everyone. We have daily phone calls and talking points, sending messages to our activists because they need to absolutely know what they're talking about. It's very important.
Number 4, quickly, infusing pride. This is really important. We keep reminding our students the quote of Menachem Begin that said, "We're not the Jews with the stumbling knees." And we're saying Israel does not only have the right to defend itself, it has the obligation to defend itself. And you need to defend yourself too, being proud Jew on campus. We do not need, there is a notion on campuses, this is very important, there is a notion on campuses that, we can't really support Israel. Campus is the more liberal environment. Israel is not an underdog anymore. We're saying this is okay. You can still support Israel being strong and still being on the right side. Don't be afraid to defend Israel, even if it's coming from a strong position. It is defending its right to exist. So that's another important thing. And the last thing I would say is community. It was said yesterday in the first panel, community is very important. I think oftentimes students feel like they're alone on campus, like they're facing something bigger, a lot of hostility. They're maybe afraid to speak up in class, with a hostile professor or not be supported by their peers. I think that in SSI, we're trying to really create this community of activists for the students. So there won't be a moment where they'll feel alone. They feel they have the back of a national student movement. They feel they have the back of the Zionist community, of the Israelis who are there. Because if Israel is going to win the war in the Middle East, we have to win this war on college campuses for the minds of the future generations. And
thank you, Valeria. Mobilization, exposure, education, pride. I think all 4 of them are promoters of pride and community. A quick question to Sarali, and then I'm going to let Judah end with one of the hardest questions. Sarali, participation is surging everywhere. People are showing up at synagogue, at JCCs. We heard from Samantha Cohen last night. All of you are here. There's going to be tens of thousands, maybe more, on the mall. Are people showing up at Hillel in big numbers?
Yes. I think beyond just showing up, what Valeria was just saying about community, I think that's very much a need for students right now. So even if they're not the biggest advocates for Israel, they just needed the physical safe space on campus to be with people who are like them. So yes, many people have been coming to Hillel on October 10th, just 3 days after the attack. We held a vigil on campus. We had about 200, if not more, students show up on campus, on the quad, coming with Israeli flags, praying and mourning, and it was beautiful and heartbreaking and sad, but it was so special to have everybody come together. Especially during such a traumatizing time. And I have to say that I'm so extremely proud of my community of students for mobilizing so quickly, for continuing to be proud of who they are, and for continuing to come to the space that they know is theirs, and for advocating for themselves to have a space on campus.
Thank you. Let me, I'll sneak in one more point. I'll turn to Judah, and we had a whispered choreography. What's also working that I see, I'm in the classroom, but out of the classroom, a constituency that has tremendous power and influence on every campus are the administrators, the deans, the provosts, all the way up to the presidents. Certain communities are engaging in their own local ways. Nationally, Hillel has a very careful, I think an underreported program called their Campus Climate Initiative. And these efforts, which often they're implemented over many months. The Hillel program is a 12 or 18-month series of engagements. I find they're very important. It's another safety net, not because they're instilling some kind of defender mindset, but they help administrators who have a default often to both sidesism and to free speech. They help them understand where the lines are and how to identify when discourse or even criticism of Israel, which is legitimate of its policies, crosses the line. And it's also like in the Cold War, this audience, I think, is old enough to know, there's also those red phones. They're there in an emergency. If you're scrambling to try to find a university president, I'm sorry to say they're busy people. And when you already have those relationships and the dean and the provost, it's hugely important. I want to end with Judah for one sec. So just hold for one sec. Judah and I were whispering. Judah represents Habonim Dror. It's a progressive Zionist movement. The progressive spaces right now are the hardest. The far right is hard, but it's not on campus. The far left is hard. How are you navigating? What's working?
Yeah, I want to touch on something that SSI touched on. One thing the panel's about, what's helping to stop anti-Semitism and helping to stop anti-Zionism. it's important that Jews support Israel. But Jews that already support Israel being reinforced in their belief to continue to support Israel is not stopping anti-Semitism. It's good, but it's not doing anything to actually say, like, there are divisive spaces. And if I already support Israel, I don't need to support Israel more. We're good on that front. What we need to do is cross boundaries and say, actually, when this happens, this affects me. Digging your heels in while it's an immediate reaction is not the solution. When I go into progressive spaces, which I do often, I reach out a hand and I listen to what they have to say. I listen with empathy, and then I discuss what they have to say. I know what I'm talking about, and I bring the questions that I have to make them see why my perspective might be the case, and also listen to their perspective to make sure they're heard and it's not just a battle. Because if I don't hear them, they will only also dig their heels in. On Columbia, recently, there was a doxing truck, and SJP and JVP just got banned. While many of you might nod approval, and the discourse has been very bad from SJP and JVP, centrist Jews on campus that normally support Israel aren't happy. And you might scoff. Look at the room here is mostly adults, mostly old people. You're losing the young voice. I'm serious. You're losing the young voice. And you can dig your heels in, but the key is to come to conversations. I'm not asking much, but to say that what matters in these critical spaces.
You can't run away. I see you're saying you're having a lot of hard conversations.
Right. And
Sure.
and you have to have them. It's a requirement. It's not digging your heels in and banning people on campus or calling people out. It's calling people in and saying, what's my perspective?
Sure.
And we need to make change. And the youth need to be engaged. And they need to be listened to.
I want to thank Valeria, Tal, Judah, and Sarali. They're not wearing uniforms up here, but think of them as on the front lines. They're battling. They're beacons of Jewish peoplehood, of Zionism on campuses. I want the last voice to be heard to be Sarali's. It's under the rubric of see something, say something. What do we want to be encouraging everyone on campus to be doing?
To report. Something I find very important is that students report incidents that happen on campus. Oftentimes, Jewish students don't report, especially things that happen in the classroom. Oh, I don't want my grade to be affected. I don't want my professor to call me out. Sometimes I'm the only Jewish student in the room, which is very valid. But then that takes away accountability from the school. If you don't report anything, the school has no proof. So I can come to the school and say a million times, hey, I have 100 students that came to me, and they said, well, nobody reported anything. So there are options for students to report things anonymously. I get in touch with every student that sends me a report, and I help them file a report with the school.
Sorry, thank you. See something, say something. I'm going to stick around. If the four of you agree, we'll be in the back of the room. We could take some questions on the side if our organizers allow. I'm going to turn it back to Shoshana. Thank all of you again, please.